Letitia has always been a determined and dreamy young woman, despite growing up in a humble neighborhood in the city's suburbs. Since she was a child, her eyes shone with the desire to make a difference in the world. Her father, a bricklayer of few words, and her mother, a seamstress who worked tirelessly, always did everything they could to give her a better life. Even with the support of her family, Letitia knew that the path would be full of challenges. Her biggest dream was to work in the health field. Since she was a teenager, she wanted to be a nurse, inspired by the care that health professionals gave to her mother, who often fell ill due to hard work. For Letitia, nursing was not just a career, but a calling, something she felt deep down in her soul. After finishing her initial studies, she got a job as a cleaner in one of the largest hospitals in the city. It wasn't what she dreamed of, but she knew that this would be the first step towards achieving her goals. Every day, she walked the hospital's bright corridors, cleaning rooms with dedication. At night, when things were quieter, Letitia would take advantage of her breaks to study, always sitting in the hospital cafeteria with her biology and anatomy books, dreaming of the day she would trade her cleaning uniform for a nurse's coat. It was on one of these cold nights, during one of her long shifts, that Letitia met Raphael, one of the most respected doctors in the hospital. They met by chance near the coffee machine. Letitia, always shy, didn't expect Raphael to start a conversation, but he soon showed interest in her. What started as a friendly exchange of words quickly turned into frequent conversations. Over time, Letitia and Raphael began to see each other more frequently in passionate romantic encounters. Raphael was everything Letitia admired. A brilliant doctor, dedicated to his work and respected by everyone. In addition, he was charismatic and kind, making Letitia feel special whenever they were together. Little by little, she was madly in love with him. Raphael seemed to see something more in Letitia than just her job as a cleaner. However, as the months went by, Letitia noticed a strange duality in his behavior. When they were alone, he was affectionate, helpful and treated her with respect, but in the workplace, everything changed. Raphael avoided interacting with Letitia in front of his colleagues and his words became short and distant. She was never invited to the hospital's social events and he would withdraw at the times when she needed support the most. At first, Letitia tried to understand Raphael's behavior, thinking that he just wanted to separate his personal and professional life. However, over time, his excuses began to no longer make sense. There was something else that she could not ignore, the feeling that Raphael was ashamed of her. Letitia soon discovered that Raphael came from a wealthy family, which seemed to weigh on her relationship with her colleagues. He was a doctor and businessman, living in a completely different world from her, a young woman from humble origins who struggled to earn a living cleaning the hospital. This difference seemed like an impossible chasm to bridge. One night, after another secret meeting, Letitia decided to confront Raphael. "Why don't you ever introduce me to your friends? Why do you seem ashamed of me?" she asked, her voice thick with insecurity. Raphael, as always, tried to calm her down with gentle words, but this time the explanation he offered was that the hospital was a complicated place. "I just want to avoid complications," he said, without looking her in the eye. Letitia listened to his words, but the excuse didn't convince her. What was he really trying to avoid? What was wrong with being with her? Although she wanted to believe that Raphael had good intentions, the reality was too harsh to ignore. He was ashamed of his work, his origins and, above all, of her. From that moment on, the relationship that had previously brought happiness began to transform into a mixture of joy and pain. Letitia loved Raphael, but with each passing day, the burden of living in the shadows grew. She knew she deserved more and that her value was not in the work she did or the bank account she didn't have, but in the strong, determined person capable of loving deeply that she was. However, the fear of losing Raphael kept her from making a drastic decision. Letitia struggled with the duality of her love for Raphael and the pain that was growing in her heart. It was just another ordinary morning at the hospital. She arrived early, as always, enjoying the tranquility of the morning as the echoes of her footsteps filled the empty hallways. She began to organize her cleaning supplies and headed to Raphael's office. Her heart, which used to warm just thinking about him, now felt heavy. The night before, Raphael had treated her with a kindness that seemed false. The distance he maintained in the workplace contrasted painfully with the intimacy they shared outside of it. Letitia tried to focus on her work so as not to think too much. While tidying up the office, her eyes came across something unusual, an elegant white envelope with gold details that shone in the dim light. She hesitated, but curiosity led her to pick it up. Looking closely, she noticed that the envelope had a carefully written name, Rafael Oliveira and Mara Acosta. Letitia's heart sank when she saw another woman's name next to Raphael's. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and froze when she discovered that it was a wedding invitation. She read the words 3 times, as if trying to absorb the reality of what she saw. Raphael was engaged to a woman named Mara Acosta, the daughter of a famous surgeon at the hospital. Reality hit her like an avalanche, and Letitia felt an unbearable pain. How could he do this? All the promises and dreams they had shared now seemed like bitter illusions. The shock made the invitation slip from her hands, and a wave of heat ran through her body, followed by a paralyzing cold. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to break down there, in the office. Her mind was full of questions, with one in particular cutting into her heart like a knife. Why had he never told her? Why had he kept her in the shadows while he built a life with another woman? With her mind in a whirlwind of emotions, Letitia gathered her things and left the hospital, ignoring the worried looks of the colleagues who crossed her path. The walk home seemed endless. When she finally arrived, tears began to fall, and the pain of betrayal and humiliation consumed her. She remembered all the conversations they had had and the moments when Raphael had made her feel special, only to realize that none of it was real. She had been used. Letitia couldn't stop thinking about the wedding invitation. Every memory of smiles, touches, and lies tormented her. She knew she couldn't go on like this and needed to understand how Raphael had managed to hide something so important. That very night, she decided to confront him and asked him to come to her house. Raphael arrived unconcerned, with his voice calm as always, but Letitia felt a huge weight on her chest. Noticing his expression, which said nothing, Letitia took the wedding invitation out of her pocket and placed it on the table. Raphael looked at the envelope and his face changed. He knew he had been discovered. Letitia broke the silence. "Raphael, you're getting married." Her words were full of pain, and the silence that followed seemed to echo through the house. "Why didn't you ever tell me? I mean nothing to you?" Raphael let out a heavy sigh, avoiding looking her in the eyes. "I wanted to tell you, but we always knew we were from different worlds." He had sensed something deeper in Letitia, something that scared him, a reflection of what he didn't have the courage to follow. He chose Mara because it was easier, while the future with Letitia seemed uncertain. These words hit Letitia like a punch in the stomach. "Different worlds?" she repeated, incredulous. "You lied to me the whole time. Didn't I mean anything to you?" "It wasn't a lie," Raphael replied, his voice low but emotionless. "What we had was real, but we could never be more than that. Mara is the person I should marry. We both make sense." Letitia felt her heart shatter. "So I was never enough for you?" Tears streamed down her face. "Was I just a diversion while you planned your life with someone else?" Raphael tried to defend himself, but Letitia didn't want to hear it anymore. Emotions rose and, determined, Raphael headed for the door. A part of her felt relief at finally having answers, as painful as they were, but the relief didn't lessen the pain. Raphael would never love her as she loved him. When she closed the door, Letitia also closed a chapter of her life. In the following days, sadness overwhelmed her. A weight on her chest seemed to never ease. Letitia felt betrayed, humiliated, and everything she had built emotionally was crumbling. Every time she walked through the hospital corridors, where they had exchanged glances and smiles so many times, the pain grew. Work, which had once been a refuge for her dreams, now became a constant reminder of the lie she had lived. Letitia knew she needed to change her life. Staying in the same city, going to the same places and dealing with the painful memories of Raphael was becoming unbearable. The hospital, where they used to go for coffee together, now only brought out the pain. Every corner of the city seemed to suffocate her, preventing her from moving forward. That was when she decided to take action. She left everything behind, even with the financial challenges that this could bring. She began to plan a new life far away from everything that reminded her of Raphael. Leaving a stable job and the city where she grew up was risky, but Letitia knew she had no other choice. She kept telling herself, "I have to go." The city that once seemed full of possibilities had now become an emotional prison from which she needed to escape. Within a few weeks, Letitia found a small apartment in a distant city. It was a simple and peaceful place where she could start over, far from the shadows of the past. Although she still felt pain, there was a new sense of relief growing inside her, a chance to leave the past behind and reconnect with herself. The drive to her new city was marked by the constant noise of the streets and asphalt, like a soundtrack to the restless thoughts that tormented her. The mountains in the distance stood like silent sentinels, while the warm wind that came through the window brought promises of renewal. But at the same time, it was a constant reminder of what she was leaving behind. The landscapes passed before her eyes, but her mind was lost in thoughts of the pain she still felt. Letitia knew that the pain would never end, but when she moved into her small apartment, she felt something new, an unexpected peace. It was a simple but welcoming place, and for the first time in months, she took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel a hope that she had not experienced in a long time. "I am ready to rebuild myself," she murmured to herself as she looked out the window. The wind gently rustled the trees and the peaceful view calmed her. The future was still uncertain, and starting over would not be easy, but Letitia was determined to move forward. She knew she deserved more than being a shadow in someone else's life. Now, in a new place, with new opportunities, Letitia decided to make a list of how she could integrate into the new city. This idea brought her a sense of tranquility that she had not felt in a long time. As the days passed, she adapted to the new routine, far from everything that reminded her of Raphael. The work she found was simple but honest, and helped to occupy her time. Little by little, she began to feel stronger and able to move forward. The pain was still there, but it was beginning to transform into a determination to rebuild her life. However, fate had other plans. In the weeks after the move, Letitia began to notice that her body was different. She felt constantly tired and nauseous. At first, she thought it was just the stress of the move and the intense emotions, but the symptoms did not go away. So, he decided it was time to see a doctor. The appointment seemed like just a formality, a quick checkup to make sure everything was okay. Well. But when the tests were over, the doctor came into the room with a cautious smile on his face. Letitia began to hear the doctor's calm voice, "I have news you didn't expect. You're pregnant." The words echoed in her mind as she tried to process what this meant, pregnant with Raphael. The revelation was a real shock. The doctor asked her to take a deep breath and continued, telling her that it was twins. Leaving the clinic, Letitia was in a state of shock, with the words still echoing in her head, twins. The way back home seemed surreal. When she finally settled down on the small sofa in her apartment, tears began to roll down her face. She was pregnant with Raphael, the man who had her heart, but who had chosen someone else to share his life with. The situation was painful, and everything was even more complicated now that two lives depended on her. Letitia knew she didn't want to tell Raphael, because he had made his decision, and that decision didn't include her. As the weeks went by, Letitia began to accept the idea of motherhood. What began as an initial shock turned into a growing feeling of love. She knew that raising 2 children alone would be a challenge, but she also felt strong enough to face this reality. She promised herself that she would give her children all the love and care in the world. Letitia also faced important choices to protect her children in a world that often seemed hostile. Between medical appointments and organizing events for young people, Letitia had little time to think about the past. But one quiet day, while organizing some old boxes that she had brought from her parents' house, she found something that would completely change her view of herself, an old letter hidden among forgotten papers. Curious, she opened the envelope, yellowed with time, and when she read it, she was speechless. The letter revealed that Letitia had been adopted as a baby, something that her adoptive parents had never told her. The discovery was devastating. How could they have lived so many years without knowing the truth about their origins? Why didn't my parents ever mention anything? Letitia sat on the floor, holding the letter, feeling the weight of a new reality. Who were her real parents? Why did they give her up for adoption? Questions arose in her mind. Despite the confusion of emotions, Letitia knew she could not rest until she found answers. Determined, she began research to discover the identity of her biological mother. The path would not be easy. Finding information about old adoptions was complicated. Many documents were incomplete or inaccessible. But Letitia did not let herself be discouraged. After many failed attempts and clues that led her nowhere, she finally found a solid lead that led her to a nearby town. There, she found Elena, her biological mother. The first time she saw her, Letitia was surprised by Elena's fragility. The woman before her was not the figure Letitia had imagined. She was sick and old. In a weak voice, Elena told her story. She had been forced to give Letitia up for adoption when she was very young, due to extreme poverty. "I couldn't take care of you," Elena said, with tears in her eyes. "It was the hardest decision of my life, but I wanted you to have the chance to live better than I could offer you." Over time, Elena managed to get back on her feet and build a stable life, but she never married or had any more children. "I spent my whole life looking for you," she confessed, her voice breaking. Elena's words brought out a mix of emotions in Letitia. Letitia felt the pain of knowing that her biological mother had searched for her for so many years and the regret of not having been found sooner. However, she also felt a sense of peace in finally understanding her origins. From that moment on, Letitia and Elena began to build a relationship to make up for lost time. During the days when Elena was sick, Letitia decided to stay by her side until the end. In the months that followed their reunion, she dedicated herself to caring for her biological mother. Elena's illness was progressing rapidly, and Letitia knew that her time with her was short. Even so, each moment shared was a chance to heal the wounds of the past and create a connection that, although late, brought comfort to both of them. During long afternoons, Elena would tell stories of her youth, explaining the difficulties she had faced and the reason why she had made the painful decision to give her up for adoption. Letitia listened patiently and lovingly, understanding the sacrifice her mother had made. In the last days of Elena's life, Letitia was by her side, holding her hand and offering the love they had not been able to share before. When Elena finally left, Letitia felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Helena left a legacy of strength and sacrifice and, as a final act of love, she left her inheritance to Letitia, providing the resources she needed to build a new future. With the inheritance that Elena had left, Letitia saw her life take a new direction. Opening a clinic would not be easy. It involved learning about management and facing the prejudice of business owners who did not believe in her vision. However, each obstacle only strengthened her determination. Letitia now had the resources to fulfill a dream that once seemed distant, to study nursing. She understood that money was not an end in itself, but a tool to transform lives, starting with her own and the lives of the twins she was carrying in her womb. In the months that followed Elena's death, the force of transformation drove Letitia to plan a new project, opening community clinics for low-income people. Inspired by her biological mother's story and the difficulties she faced, Letitia wanted to provide quality medical care to those who, like her, often did not have access to the necessary care. So Letitia decided to become more than just a nurse. She wanted to create real change. She used the legacy left by Elena to start her own network of clinics, starting in a poor neighborhood in the city where she grew up. The project was ambitious but sensitive, to offer consultations, exams and treatments at affordable prices, ensuring that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to healthcare. With her dedication, Letitia quickly gained the trust of the community. The care provided was humane, and the professionals hired were chosen not only for their technical skills, but also for their commitment to caring for people with dignity and respect. Letitia, who once dreamed of being a nurse, has now become a businesswoman and philanthropist, dedicating her life to ensuring that no one goes without care due to lack of resources. Despite all her professional success, Letitia's greatest joy was yet to come. Her twins were born healthy and strong, bringing new light to her life. She raised them alone, with the same love and dedication she received from her adoptive mother and, later, from Elena. Even with the challenges of being a single mother of 2 babies, Letitia faced each obstacle with courage and resilience. Her children were her greatest motivation. During the first years of motherhood, which were intense, she knew how to balance raising the twins with expanding her clinics, always focusing on what was most important, creating a loving environment for them. Letitia wanted her children to grow up knowing the value of compassion and hard work, understanding from an early age the importance of helping others. "Whenever you can, do good," she would repeat as she hugged them affectionately. As her children grew, Letitia's clinics also prospered. The project, which began modestly, soon expanded to other cities, becoming a reference network in community care. Her dedication and vision were recognized not only by local communities, but also by health authorities, who saw her as a leader in her field. She was invited to give lectures and share her story of overcoming and transformation. Despite her success, Letitia never forgot her roots. She continued to visit the poorest neighborhoods where she had grown up, ensuring that her clinics remained focused on helping those most in need. She made sure to maintain direct contact with patients, understanding their difficulties and needs. For Letitia, her work was not just a profession, but a life mission. Little by little, she began to see her journey as proof that, despite the challenges, it is possible to reinvent yourself and find strength in adversity. The love for her children, Elena's legacy, and the values inherited from her adoptive parents shaped a strong, resilient woman committed to the well-being of others. Letitia overcame the pain and transformed her scars into something great, becoming an example of perseverance for everyone around her. With her twins growing up healthy and her clinics booming, Letitia looked to the future with optimism. It was a quiet afternoon when she decided to go out for lunch with her children at a simple and cozy restaurant located in a charming neighborhood in the city. Her children, full of energy they were talking and laughing incessantly, filling the room with the innocence of childhood. Letitia watched them tenderly, amazed at how fast and healthy they had grown, and how each day spent with them brought new experiences and more love. However, in the midst of that tranquility, a movement near the entrance of the restaurant caught her attention. When she looked up, her heart raced. It was Raphael, the man who, for a time, meant a lot to her and who was also responsible for one of the biggest disappointments of her life. He was standing in the doorway, with an astonished look that made it clear that he also recognized her. Letitia felt a mixture of emotions, a little nervousness, but also a deep feeling that time had passed and the love she once felt no longer existed. She had changed, transformed, and the woman Raphael had known no longer existed. He hesitated for a few seconds, clearly disconcerted, but finally approached the table. He seemed nervous, not knowing exactly what to say or how to react. His eyes moved between the twins and Letitia, and she noticed the confusion on his face, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't understand. Can I sit down? Raphael murmured in disbelief. Letitia, remaining calm, nodded, internally preparing herself for what was to come. She knew that this reunion with Raphael would be inevitable, and now that moment had arrived. Raphael sat at the table, his gaze fixed on the twins who were distracted by the food and the games. For a few moments, he said nothing, just observed them, as if trying to decipher something that was in front of him, but that his mind still couldn't process. Letitia decided to give him the time he needed to understand what was happening. I heard that your life has changed a lot, he said, in a hesitant voice. Yes, my life has changed. I have changed, Letitia replied calmly. Her voice had a firmness that Raphael hadn't expected, and she realized that he was looking at her with a mixture of admiration and discomfort, as if he were facing someone he no longer recognized. Time had passed, and Letitia's transformation was clear. Letitia, who used to feel insecure, now radiates confidence and serenity. She is a very different woman from the young woman he once left behind. After a long silence, Raphael confessed, I got divorced. To him, this information seemed important, almost like a way to justify his past choices. Mara and I didn't work out. She didn't want to have children, and that separated us. It took me a while to realize that I made the wrong decisions. Letitia listened in silence, without showing any reaction to Raphael's words. What might have previously shaken her heart no longer had the same impact. Raphael continued trying to find the right words. I know I made mistakes, he said, looking directly into her eyes. I never stopped thinking about you, and I'm very sorry for what happened between us. Until that moment, Letitia had remained calm, but finally her voice became firm. What happened between us is part of the past. I'm not the same person anymore, and you. I haven't either. I've moved on. Raphael nodded, visibly regretful. I should never have left you. I should have been more honest with you. Letitia took a deep breath, reflecting for a moment. She had overcome the pain, rebuilt her life and no longer carried the weight of that story. What really mattered now was the present, her children, her work and the new life she had built. But there was something Raphael needed to know. He began to speak, with a softer voice, but still full of conviction, they are my children. Raphael's words hung in the air for a moment, like a blow that took him by surprise. She remained silent, trying to process what she had just heard. They are mine, he murmured, visibly stunned. Letitia stood firm. Yes, Raphael, they are your children. But I raised them alone. You made your decision, and I made mine. I never needed you to raise them. Raphael seemed to crumble, as if he finally felt the weight of his choices. He looked at the twins again, now with a new perspective. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. Why didn't you ever tell me? Letitia took a deep breath before answering. Because you weren't part of my life at that time. I didn't want them to grow up with someone who didn't know they existed. I did everything for them. Raphael was silent, struggling to find words. He looked dejected, carrying a weight of regret, but Letitia knew he wasn't there to reconcile the past or seek justifications. What mattered now was the future. Can I meet them? Can I be there? Raphael asked, his voice agitated. Letitia looked at him for a long moment, thinking. She knew that her children deserved to know their father, but she also understood that this decision could not be made lightly. They deserved someone who was truly willing to get involved, who wanted to be there. I'm not going to stop you from meeting them, Letitia finally said. But understand one thing, what you did in the past cannot be ignored. Now, they are your responsibility. Do you really want to be a part of their lives? This must be demonstrated with your actions, not just with words. Raphael nodded, accepting the conditions. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to prove Letitia's intentions. For her part, she no longer carried the weight of the past. The decision she was making now was not about Raphael, but about the well-being of her children. As Raphael stood up, Letitia turned her attention to the twins, who continued playing, oblivious to the depth of the conversation that had just taken place. She knew the future would be challenging, but she had the strength to face whatever came. Raphael left the restaurant, and Letitia stood there, watching her children with a quiet laugh. The past had finally been left behind, and the future, although uncertain, was full of possibilities. Full of possibilities, Letitia overcame everything that life threw at her. Now, she was ready to move on, without Raphael, but always with the loves of her life, her children. This is a story of overcoming and transformation. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and share your opinion in the comments. We want to know what you thought of Letitia's journey and how this story touched you.